Building collapsed in e-Mpangeni on the KZN North Coast. For more on this developing story, we cross live now to our reporter Mlungisi Khumalo, who's at the scene for us on the scene. Hey Mlu, thank you very much indeed for your time. What's the latest? What do we know?
Well, Ben, what I can tell you for now is that there is a very, very somber mood right here at the Pentecostal Church in Dlangubo, just slightly outside e-Mpangeni. Now, we understand that now, as we speak, in fact, pathological services are actually here trying to calm the scene and trying to remove some of the remains of the people that died. And yes, again, we can confirm with you that the figure currently stands at 13 people, and we understand that 10 people are still in hospital and they are critically injured. And now we also understand that 6 of those people have obtained minor injuries. But with me, I've got Lennox Mabaso, the spokesperson for the Department of Culture, who will just give us a brief overview as to what's the way forward from here. And you mentioned earlier on, Blaine, that various government officials had made their way here into Dlangubo at the Pentecostal Church. And amongst of those ministers is the Minister of Labour, Mildred Oliphant. Now, also quite interesting enough, she said that she is a member of this church and she was going to make her way early this morning to worship with some of their congregates, but unfortunately because of this disaster she was not able to do that. We understand as we speak to you right now she's also currently here. And when I spoke to you earlier on, Ben, I mentioned to you that last year, July, to be much more precise, the president of the country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, was also here to speak to some of the members of the church and the congregants. And during his address, the pastor of the church asked for the president to give them a better building, to give them a better structure so that they could worship. But unfortunately, almost a year later, that did not happen, and now we understand that that structure just behind me collapsed last night, in the late hours of last night. And of course, throughout the whole entire night, emergency rescue services were here trying to calm the scene and collecting as many bodies as possible. But unfortunately, we've been told not to come closer to the scene as it is very active, and we also understand that the forensic team is also there. But without further ado, let me just talk to Lennox Mabaso. Thank you very much, Lennox. What's the latest here with this incident?
Well, indeed, the structure is a very solid structure. It's an act of nature, it's an act of God. Not even a president could have been able to save this particular situation. You can see that, the warning that we issued on Tuesday, we indicated that the weather was going to be quite serious. It was going to be an inclement weather, and indeed, as you can see, even the trees, they've been uprooted in some of the... So it was a heavy storm that affected this area. The situation right now is devastating. Traumatized members of the church, some are still arriving. We have seen Minister of Labour, Minister Mildred Oliphant, who is a member of this church, completely distraught by what has happened here, the bishops. But government is here. The Minister, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, is also coming here, Minister of Culture nationally. MEC for Culture, MEC Nomsatu Bengube, was here. She was completely also in deep pain, and she has immediately gone back to mobilize more support and resources, and will interact with the media later on. We understand that we're still sitting at a number of 13 people dead. Others are still in hospital. We are still also having the crime scene being currently combed by the police. And they will be giving a media briefing soon, and also taking you closer to the accident scene so that you can witness what has happened. So Minister Dr. Mlungisi Khumalo will lead the government delegation that will address the nation on this particular developing situation here. Very, very tragic indeed.
Now, we understand that last night you sent out weather warnings. How severe was this storm?
It was very severe. It was very heavy. There was a storm. Cars were parked on the road. Traffic was chock-a-block even along the freeway here, and many parts of this particular area. There was no movement at all. That's how severe it was. As we were driving along this road, as I indicated earlier on, you can see trees were uprooted. So even the most resilient of structures was being tempted and threatened by this particular weather. We are in the seasons of climate change, and on behalf of government, on behalf of the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Premier Mlungisi Khumalo, we extend heartfelt condolences to the family. The government is here to comfort those affected, the bishops, the reverend, the members of the church. The families will be visited because they come from various parts of the province. You can see others are still arriving, as I indicated, without actually even aware of what has happened. So government is doing everything possible to make sure that we mitigate the suffering and the impact. Psychological healing, spiritual healing is all that will be needed here. We ask of everybody to put this church and the families in prayer at this point in time.
And lastly, Maba, so do we understand or do we know how many members of the congregants were present when this wall collapsed?
we will give more details when Minister Dr. Mlungisi lead the government delegation of province, local and national in giving a preliminary report of what transpired here.
Thank you very much. That was Lennox Mabaso, the spokesperson for COGTA in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, just giving us a brief overview as to what transpired last night when that structure behind me collapsed, and as a result 13 people died, 10 were critically injured, and we understand that 6 of them are now in hospital receiving treatment. And we also understand that the families of the victims are rather distraught as they continue to trickle in their numbers. And of course we'll then get a briefing from the Minister of COGTA, Mlungisi, who will just give us a way forward as well. Over, back to you in studio, Blaine.
Mlu, I just want you to describe what you're seeing in terms of the structure behind you. So from what I can see from my vantage point, I see the roof is largely intact, and it seems like the side or the front of this wall has just caved in. Is that how it played out? What are you hearing?
Yes, indeed, Ben, although the information that we are getting is still roughly sketched, like I mentioned earlier on, that forensic teams were there trying to examine the extent of the damage and then from then onwards, the media will then be given an opportunity to ask the various questions. But from what I can tell right now, when we spoke to the gentleman that actually barred the media from coming any closer, he said that currently they cannot allow the media to get any closer in front of the structure, as they believe that some of the body parts, as gruesome as it sounds, some body parts actually still buried beneath the rubble. And if I can actually see properly, we can actually see that there's also bricks as well. So you can almost tell that it was extremely a tragedy that transpired last night. And of course, earlier on, Mildred Oliphant was there, and she was extremely distraught, saying that this is a church where she comes to worship, and she has not seen such an incident before.
Yeah, I understand investigations are still continuing, but I just want to get a sense of what we're talking about here. So from what I can see from behind you, it's just one side of the wall that has collapsed. Is that correct, or are you hearing, I know you haven't had a proper look around the whole church, but is it just this one side, or are you told that other sides have collapsed around it as well?
Okay, when we made our way earlier on over here, it's just one side of the church. We're still not sure whether any parts of the roofs did in fact collapse, but of course we'll find that information when the media is briefed.
Do we know anything more about the congregants, the victims of this tragedy, maybe the age groups or where they're from?
Okay, 13 of the people that died in this accident are rather from the Zululand municipality. We spoke to the mayor of Zululand, who was here, Mr. Mbata, and he said that he was going to talk to us, the media, about some of the victims that died. So as far as we know, that's what we understand. We are not particularly sure about the age group, but in terms of the status of those that were critically injured, we are told that they are receiving the best treatments, the best medical treatments. I'm just going to release Mr. Lennox Mabaso. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
They are getting the best medical attention from the various hospitals where they are. And of course, I mentioned earlier, Blaine, that 13 of the victims are from Zululand municipality, which is about slightly 2 hours from here. And of course, we'll be expecting then their family members to come over here. I mentioned earlier on that some of the family members are here. If you can just see behind me, there's actually cars that are trickling in their numbers. And some of the dramatic scenes that we saw when we got here, unfortunately, we were then told not to capture some of the victims or some of the victims' families rather crying. We were just told it's going to be extremely insensitive of us to do that, Blaine. Yeah.
No, good call. Thank you very much indeed. I know the details are sketchy at this stage, but we do appreciate you reporting them. Mlungisi Khumalo coming to us live from the north coast of KwaZulu-Natal. Thank you very much indeed. We'll go back to Mlu when he has further details.